Girl sees millionaire about to be devoured by vultures, so she does this. Comment what you thought of this story, giving it a rating from 0 to 10, and let me know what city you're watching from. I really want to know if you liked my story and get to know you better, so subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The scorching March sun punished the dirt road that connected Red Creek to the Oakhaven Township when Lily stopped to adjust the torn bag slung over her small shoulder. At 4 years old, the girl had already learned that aluminum cans were worth more than plastic bottles, and that drivers rarely stopped for a dirty child asking for help. Her bare feet knew every rock on that path, every pothole that filled with mud when it rained. That morning, she had found a real treasure, 3 nearly pristine soda cans tossed on the roadside. Lily saved them carefully, knowing she could trade them for a loaf of bread at Old Ben's bakery if he was in a good mood. The girl's stomach had been rumbling for 2 days, ever since the bridge where she slept had been taken over by other homeless people who had kicked her out in the middle of the night. A strange noise made her stop. It was a sound she didn't recognize, as if someone were whispering incomprehensible words mixed with muffled groans. Lily raised her head, shielding her eyes from the sun with her small, dirty hand, trying to locate where that unsettling sound was coming from. That's when she saw it. The barbed wire fence that marked Farmer Tony's pasture was decorated with something that shouldn't have been there. A man in a dark suit, tied by his arms to the fence, hung unconscious with his head slumped to the side. His legs were covered in dried blood, and around him, 5 enormous vultures methodically pecked at his shins and ankles as if they were savoring a special banquet. Lily felt her heart race. She had seen vultures before, of course, but always flying high or devouring animals already lost. She had never seen them attacking a living person. The man in the suit was breathing irregularly, and every so often he would groan softly, as if having terrible nightmares. Without a second thought, the girl started screaming with all the force of her little lungs. "Get out of here! Get out of here, you ugly vulture!" She took the cans she had collected and began banging them together, creating a deafening noise that echoed down the empty road. The vultures raised their bald heads and stared at her with irritation, but they didn't move. Lily ran towards the fence, continuing to bang the cans and shouting curse words she had learned from hearing adults fight under the bridge. "Go away! Leave him alone!" Her words came out mixed with tears she didn't even realize she was shedding. Finally, the vultures opened their huge wings and flew lazily away, annoyed at the interruption of their meal. Lily, trembling, approached the tied-up man. He had graying hair and a poorly kept beard, and his face was swollen on the left side, as if he had taken a hard blow. The ropes binding him to the fence were so tight they had left purple marks on his wrists. Mister, wake up!" Lily tried to shake him gently by the shoulder, but he was too heavy and didn't respond. That's when she noticed a wallet lying on the ground near his feet. The girl picked it up and opened it, finding documents with the name Arthur Miller and a photo of the man when he was younger and smiling. Suddenly, Arthur slowly opened his eyes, blinking several times as if trying to understand where he was. When he focused his gaze on the dirty, barefoot girl in front of him, his expression was one of total confusion. Who are you?" His voice came out hoarse and weak. "I'm Lily. The vultures were eating you. I scared them away." The girl spoke matter-of-factly, as if saving people attacked by vultures was part of her daily routine. Arthur tried to move, but the ropes held him firmly. "Help me get out of here, little girl, please." Lily examined the complex knots that held the man. They were knots tied by someone who knew what they were doing, not something improvised. Someone had wanted to make sure Arthur stayed exactly where he was. The girl began to pull and undo the knots with her small, agile fingers, accustomed to opening trash cans and untangling wires found on the street. "How did you get here, mister?" she asked as she worked. Arthur closed his eyes, trying to remember. Confused fragments returned to his memory. A heated argument at the factory, angry voices, someone shouting about unfair layoffs. Then everything went dark. I don't remember clearly. I think someone brought me here. When Lily finally managed to free him, Arthur fell to his knees on the ground, his shaky legs unable to support his weight. He looked at the wounds on his shins, pecked by the vultures, which were already starting to get infected in the heat. Then he looked at the girl who had saved his life, a dirty, thin child who shouldn't have been alone on that deserted road. "Where are your parents, Lily?" The girl shrugged. "I don't have parents. I live under the St. Peter's Creek Bridge." Arthur felt something break inside his chest. Here was a child who had risked her safety to save him, and she lived alone on the streets. The contrast between his gratitude for being saved and the shocking reality of the girl's situation left him speechless. Lily helped Arthur to his feet, offering her small shoulder for support. "Can you walk? The town isn't far from here." As they walked slowly down the dusty road, Arthur couldn't stop looking at the girl beside him. She had saved his life without asking for anything in return, without even knowing him. And now, as she helped him return to civilization, Lily hummed a sad little song he didn't recognize, as if carrying injured men was just another of the many burdens she already carried in her short, difficult life. By the time they finally spotted the first houses of Red Creek, Arthur had already made a decision that would change both of their lives forever. Arthur Miller's house was on Magnolia Lane, one of the most traditional streets in Red Creek, where two-story residences boasted well-kept gardens and wrought-iron gates. When Lily saw the yellow house with its wide porch and carved wooden windows, her eyes widened in surprise. She had never imagined that such beautiful and large houses existed. "Is this where you live?" she asked, still supporting Arthur, who was limping noticeably. "It is, my dear." Arthur took a deep breath before opening the gate. He knew that what was about to happen would change everything in his home, but he couldn't just abandon the girl who had saved his life. The sound of the gate alerted Helen Miller, who came running out of the kitchen where she was preparing lunch. At 58, Helen was still an imposing woman with always brushed hair and impeccable clothes. When she saw her injured husband leaning on a dirty, barefoot child, her face went through several different expressions before settling on a mixture of shock and disgust. "My God, Arthur, what happened to you? And who is this? This girl? Helen, this is Lily. She saved my life." Arthur approached his wife, trying to keep his voice calm. "Someone left me tied to a fence on the Oakhaven Road. Vultures were attacking me when she arrived." Helen looked from Arthur to Lily, noticing the dried blood on her husband's pants and the strong smell the girl exuded. "Vultures?" "Arthur, you're delirious. Get inside. You need a doctor." Lily remained at the gate, clutching her bag of cans. She had learned to recognize when she wasn't welcome, and the elegant woman's expression made that very clear. "Mr. Arthur, I'll be going now. I'm glad you're okay." "No." Arthur turned to her urgently. "Lily, you can't just leave like this. You saved my life. I need to repay you somehow." "Arthur, what are you thinking?" Helen whispered sharply, pulling her husband aside. "Look at the state of this child. She could be sick. She could bring trouble to our house. She's just a child, Helen. A child who lives alone on the streets and who risked her own safety to help me." Lily overheard the whispered argument and began to slowly back away. She knew this kind of talk. Adults always spoke about her as if she were a problem to be solved or avoided, but Arthur's voice made her stop. "Lily, come back here. Helen, we're going to give this girl a bath, a decent meal, and then we'll think about what to do." "Arthur Miller, have you lost your mind?" Helen crossed her arms. "We know nothing about this child. She could be dangerous. She could have run away from somewhere. Look at her, Helen. She's 4 years old. How can she be dangerous?" At that moment, Lily began to cry silently. It wasn't a dramatic or noisy cry, just tears streaming down her dirty face as she stood motionless at the gate. It was the cry of someone used to being rejected, but who still felt pain with each rejection. Arthur approached her and knelt, ignoring the pain in his injured legs. "Lily, do you want to take a warm bath and eat something?" The girl nodded shyly, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "Then come." Arthur extended his hand to her. Helen watched her husband guide the dirty girl into her immaculate house and felt a mixture of anger and apprehension. Arthur had always been a stubborn man, but he had never brought a beggar into the house. Something about that encounter on the road had fundamentally changed him. In the guest bathroom, Lily stared in fascination at the white bathtub and clean tiles. She had never taken a bath in a real tub. Helen brought clean towels and soap, making a point of keeping her distance from the girl. "Are you sure she knows how to take a bath?" Helen muttered to her husband. "Of course I do." Lily spoke with indignation. "I bathe in the creek. It's just that the water there is cold and there's mud at the bottom." While Lily bathed, quietly humming the same sad song Arthur had heard on the road, the couple talked in the kitchen. Helen nervously stirred a pot of beans, banging the spoon harder than necessary. "Arthur, tell me exactly what happened. Who did this to you?" Arthur sat down heavily at the table, still trying to organize the jumbled memories. "I was at the factory yesterday afternoon, talking to Jim about the layoffs we're going to have to make because of the drop in sales. He didn't like my decisions at all, said I was being unfair to the older employees. And you think it was him who... I don't know. I remember leaving the factory, but after that, everything gets fuzzy. I woke up tied to that fence with vultures attacking me." Arthur shuddered at the memory. If Lily hadn't shown up. "But why do you want to bring this child into our lives? Isn't it enough that she helped you?" Arthur looked at his wife with an expression she didn't recognize. "Helen, when I woke up and saw that little girl scaring away vultures to save me, something changed in me. She didn't know me, she didn't know if I was a good person or not, but she helped me anyway. That doesn't mean we have to adopt her. She lives under a bridge, Helen, under a bridge. She's 4 years old and completely alone in the world." Lily appeared at the kitchen door, wearing one of Arthur's old t-shirts that Helen had found, the garment completely swallowing her small, thin body. Her wet hair was combed back, revealing a delicate face and enormous brown eyes. "Wow, you look so pretty." Arthur smiled for the first time since the incident. Helen served a plate of rice, beans, and chicken for Lily, watching how the girl ate slowly, savoring each bite as if it were a banquet. It was obvious she hadn't had a full meal in a long time. "Lily, how long have you been living alone?" asked Arthur. "As long as I can remember. Some people told me I showed up in town as a baby, but I don't remember any of that. And you've never had anyone take care of you, no adult?" Lily shook her head. "Sometimes people gave me food or let me sleep somewhere for a night, but then they always told me to leave." Helen felt a tightness in her chest that she tried to ignore. There was something about the natural way the girl spoke of abandonment that was deeply disturbing. After lunch, Arthur took Lily to see the backyard, where there was a century-old oak tree and flower beds that Helen tended with care. The girl ran to the tree and hugged it, laughing for the first time. "Can I climb it?" "Of course you can." While Lily explored the yard, Helen watched from the kitchen window. There was something familiar in the way the girl moved her hands when she talked, a gesture she couldn't place, but that bothered her deeply. "Arthur," she called her husband inside. "We need to talk about this calmly. We can't make an impulsive decision." "Helen, look at her. When was the last time we saw a child so happy just to be able to play in a backyard? That's no reason to change our whole lives." It was then that they heard Lily singing in the yard, the same song she had been humming since she found Arthur on the road. It was a simple lullaby, but there was something in the melody that made Helen freeze completely. She knew that song, but from where? The next morning, Arthur woke before sunrise, tormented by nightmares of giant vultures chasing him down endless corridors. Cold sweat clung to his skin as he got out of bed, careful not to wake Helen. He had allowed Lily to sleep on the living room sofa, against his wife's vehement protests, and now he was heading to check if the girl was still there. He found Lily awake, sitting on the sofa with her knees pulled up to her chest, watching the first rays of sun light up the yard through the window. She had carefully folded the blanket Arthur had given her and was wearing the same oversized t-shirt from the night before. "Good morning, Mr. Arthur. Sorry if I woke you. I always wake up early. You didn't wake me, my dear. I'm the one who couldn't sleep well." Arthur sat down beside her. "Did you have nightmares?" Lily shook her head. "No, sir. I slept very well. This is the softest bed I've ever used in my life." The simplicity of the answer tugged at Arthur's heart. "Lily, tell me something. Do you remember anything from when you were a baby? Anyone who took care of you?" The girl was quiet for a moment, frowning as if trying to reach for distant memories. "Sometimes I dream about a lady who sang that song to me. She smelled nice, like a flower. But I don't know if it's a real memory or just a dream." "What kind of flower?" "Lavender, I think. I smelled it once in a house where I asked for water and it reminded me of her." Arthur filed this information away. There was something important in those memory fragments, but he couldn't figure out what. Helen came down to the kitchen an hour later, finding her husband and their guest having breakfast together. Arthur had prepared oatmeal for Lily, who ate slowly, savoring each spoonful. "Arthur, we need to resolve this situation today," Helen said, pouring herself a coffee. "The girl can't stay here indefinitely." "Why not?" Arthur's question came out more aggressive than he intended. "Because we're not a shelter. We have our lives, our commitments. You have the factory to run. I have my church groups." "Ah, yes, the church." Arthur laughed bitterly. "I'm sure Father Michael would be proud to know we're kicking out an orphan child." "We're not kicking anyone out. We're being realistic." Lily stopped eating and looked from one to the other, recognizing the signs of an impending fight. Discreetly, she began to get up from the table. "Where are you going?" asked Arthur. "I'm leaving so you don't fight because of me. Sit down." Arthur's command was firm. "Nobody is leaving. Helen, we are going to discuss this like civilized adults." But before they could continue the discussion, the doorbell rang. Arthur went to answer it, finding Jim Evans standing at the gate. The factory supervisor seemed nervous, constantly fiddling with the cap in his hands. "Mr. Miller, I came to see how you are. You didn't come back from lunch yesterday afternoon and everyone was worried." Arthur studied Jim's face, looking for signs of guilt or unusual nervousness. "I'm fine, Jim. I had a little accident yesterday." "What kind of accident?" "Someone left me tied to a fence on the Oakhaven Road. You wouldn't happen to know who might have done something like that, would you?" Jim turned visibly pale. "Tied up? My God, Mr. Miller, that's terrible. Do you have any idea who?" "Actually, I have a few suspicions." Arthur crossed his arms. "Mostly people who didn't like the layoffs," I announced. "Mr. Miller, you're not implying that I'm not implying anything. I'm asking you directly. Did you have any part in what happened to me yesterday?" Jim looked around nervously. "Of course not. How can you think such a thing? I've worked for you for 15 years. At that moment, Lily appeared behind Arthur, curious to see who was at the gate. When Jim saw her, his expression changed completely. "Who is this girl?" "This is Lily. She helped me yesterday." Jim looked from Arthur to Lily with a strange expression. "Helped you how?" "She found me tied up and freed me." "A street kid?" Jim couldn't hide the disdain in his voice. "Mr. Miller, are you sure it's safe to have someone like that in your house?" The question angered Arthur deeply. "Someone like that? She saved my life, right?" "Of course. Sorry, I didn't mean—" Jim looked at Lily again with an expression the girl couldn't decipher. "Well, I just came to check if you were okay. I'll head back to the factory now." After Jim left, Arthur stood thoughtfully. There was something in the supervisor's behavior that didn't add up. The excessive nervousness, the way he had looked at Lily, as if the girl's presence in Arthur's house was an extra problem he hadn't anticipated. Back in the kitchen, he found Helen washing dishes with brusque movements, clattering the plates in the sink. "Who was that?" she asked, without looking at him. "Jim. Said he was worried because I didn't come back yesterday. And you believe him? I don't know who to believe anymore." Arthur sat down heavily. "Helen, I need to tell you something. I don't think what happened to me was an accident or a robbery. I think it was someone from the factory itself." Helen stopped washing the dishes. "What do you mean? The ropes they tied me with were high quality. The knots were professional. Someone took me there specifically to leave me tied up. And after the way Jim reacted when he saw me with Lily..." "Arthur, you're being paranoid. Why would anyone do something like that?" "Because of the layoffs. I said I'd have to cut 12 employees because of the drop in sales, and some didn't like the decision at all." Lily, who had been playing with a rag doll Helen had found in the closet, stopped playing upon hearing the serious conversation. "Mr. Arthur, the man who was here was lying." "How do you know?" "When he looked at me, he got scared. It didn't make sense for him to be scared of a child, unless he knew I saw something I shouldn't have seen." Arthur and Helen exchanged glances. The girl's observation was surprisingly astute. "Lily, did you see anything else on the road yesterday, besides me being tied up?" The girl thought for a moment. "When I got close to you, I heard a car driving away. But I didn't see anything because I was focused on the Vultures." "What kind of car?" "A sort of rumbling noise, like the old cars that pass by the bridge where I sleep." Arthur remembered that Jim drove an old pickup truck, known for the characteristic noise of its engine. "Helen, I think we need to go to the police." "No!" Helen's response was immediate and vehement. "Arthur, think carefully about what you're doing. If you accuse your employees without concrete proof, you could destroy the factory's reputation. And if you involve the police, everyone will find out about the incident. And what's wrong with that? Don't you see? A respected businessman in town found tied to a fence, saved by a street girl. People will talk, Arthur. They'll question your competence, your authority. You'd rather I let it go? I'd rather you handle this discreetly, talk to Jim in private, find out what really happened." Lily watched the discussion in silence, but inside she was making her own decision. There was something she hadn't told Arthur, something she had seen before, finding him tied to the fence. And if the adults weren't going to do anything to find out the truth, maybe she had to act herself. 3 days had passed since Lily's arrival at the Miller house, and the tension between Arthur and Helen grew with each passing hour. Helen had established strict rules. The girl was not allowed on the second floor, couldn't touch anything in the main living room, and definitely could not accompany Arthur when he had business or church visitors. "She is not our permanent responsibility," Helen would repeat every morning at breakfast. "We need to contact the municipal shelter and resolve this situation once and for all." Arthur, for his part, had developed a routine with Lily that included teaching her to read using old magazines he found in the attic, and talking about subjects a 4-year-old shouldn't know so well, like where to find food when you're hungry or how to protect yourself from ill-intentioned adults. "Mr. Arthur," Lily said that Thursday morning, "can I go to work with you today?" "Work? Why?" "I want to see the factory where you make furniture. And I want to meet the man who came here the other day." Arthur stopped drinking his coffee. "Jim? Why do you want to get to know him better?" Lily looked at Helen, who pretended not to be paying attention while washing the dishes. "Can I tell you something just for you to hear?" Arthur took Lily into the backyard, where they sat under the large oak tree. "What do you want to tell me?" "I didn't tell you everything about the day I found you on the fence." "What didn't you tell me?" "Before I saw you tied up, I saw 3 men running through the woods. They were whispering about teaching someone a lesson, and one of them said something about the boss will think twice before firing people again. Arthur felt the blood run cold in his veins. Would you recognize those men if you saw them again? I think so. One of them was shorter and bald, another was very thin, and the third was the tallest with a big belly. The description perfectly matched Jim, Elton, and Bernard, three of the factory's oldest employees, precisely the ones who had reacted most angrily to the layoff announcement. Lily, why didn't you tell me this before? Because your wife said you couldn't get upset because of your heart, and I thought this information would make you very angry. Arthur looked at the small girl, who showed a disturbing maturity for her age. Lily, you don't need to worry about protecting me. I'm the one who should be protecting you. No one has ever protected me before, Mr. Arthur. I've always had to take care of myself. The sentence broke Arthur's heart. Well, that has changed now. And you're right. We need to go to the factory today, but not for you to meet Jim, for you to help me identify the other men who were with him. When they went back inside, they found Helen on the phone, speaking quietly. She hung up quickly when she saw them enter. "Who were you talking to?" asked Arthur. "No one important." "Arthur, we need to talk about taking this girl to your factory. People will start to talk. Let them talk. Lily has important information about what happened to me, and I'm going to get to the bottom of this." Helen looked nervously at Lily. What kind of information? She saw the men who attacked me. Arthur, a 4-year-old child, is not a reliable witness. She could have imagined anything. She described 3 men who work for me. That's not imagination. Lily watched Helen turn pale upon hearing this information. There was something in the woman's reaction that didn't make sense. It was as if she already knew something about the attack. An hour later, Arthur and Lily were walking down the main street towards Miller & Sons Furniture. It was a simple 2-story building, with a yard where wooden planks were stacked and where the air always smelled of glue and varnish. "It's smaller than I imagined," Lily commented. "Small but honest. My father started this factory 40 years ago, and I intend to leave it to—" Arthur stopped talking. He and Helen never had children, and for the first time he wondered who he would leave the family business to. When they entered the factory, Arthur noticed that the employees stopped working to look at them. There were whispers and curious glances directed at Lily, who walked beside him holding his hand. "Mr. Miller," said Ed, one of the younger carpenters, "is everything okay with you? Jim said you had an accident." "I'm fine, Ed. This is Lily. She helped me when I needed it." Lily discreetly scanned the faces of the employees, trying to recognize the 3 men she had seen fleeing through the woods. When they saw Jim approaching down the hall, she squeezed Arthur's hand. "Mr. Miller, what a surprise to see you here today. And you brought the girl." Jim forced a smile. "How are you feeling?" "Better. Lily wanted to see the factory." "Oh, that's nice." Jim crouched down to Lily's level. "So, little one, do you like what you see?" Lily stared at him intently. "Were you running in the woods the day I found Mr. Arthur?" The question caught Jim off guard. He stammered for a moment before answering. "Running in the woods? No. Why would I be running in the woods?" "Because I saw 3 men running, and one of them looked like you." Jim looked nervously at Arthur. "Mr. Miller, I don't know what this girl is talking about. I was here at the factory all day yesterday." "Yesterday? Lily is talking about 3 days ago, Jim. The day they found me tied to the fence." The supervisor paled as he realized his mistake. "Oh, yes, of course. 3 days ago I was here too." "Are you sure? Because you normally log the entry and exit times of all employees. Can I check?" Jim looked around, noticing that other employees had stopped working to listen to the conversation. "Of course, Mr. Miller. The records are in my office." As they walked to the office, Lily whispered to Arthur, "He's lying, and he's very scared." In the office, Arthur examined the time book while Jim grew increasingly nervous. "Interesting, Jim. On the day I was attacked, you noted that you left for lunch at noon and only came back at 4 in the afternoon. 4 hours for lunch is a long time, don't you think?" Had to take care of some personal problems. What kind of problems? Arthur! Helen's voice echoed through the factory. She had arrived breathless, as if she had been running. I need to talk to you urgently. Helen, what are you doing here? It's about Lily. I found out some important things. She looked meaningfully at Jim. Things you need to know now. Jim took the opportunity to back away. Mr. Miller, I'll let you two talk. Call me if you need anything. When they were alone, Helen knelt in front of Lily. Honey, can you go play outside for a little bit? I need to talk to your Uncle Arthur about grown-up things. Lily left the office but leaned against the outside of the door, listening. Arthur, I called the municipal shelter this morning. You did what? I needed to find out more about this girl's story, and what I found out is very disturbing. Arthur crossed his arms. Go on. Lily isn't just any abandoned child. She's been in the shelter before 3 times. And every time she ran away because she has serious behavioral problems. What kind of problems? Violent outbursts, compulsive lying, a tendency to invent stories to get attention. Helen paused dramatically. Arthur, the girl is troubled. And now she's making up stories about seeing Jim in the woods to cause trouble at your factory. Outside the door, Lily felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. She knew that type of accusation. She had been called a liar and troubled by several adults throughout her short life. But this time, it hurt more, because she had started to believe that Arthur was different. She moved away from the door and left the factory, determined to prove she wasn't lying. If the adults didn't believe her, she would find a way to discover the truth herself. Lily walked through the streets of Red Creek with a heavy heart, trying to decide what to do. Helen's words echoed in her mind. Liar, troubled, invents stories. She knew these accusations well. Whenever something went wrong, the adults blamed the street kid. But this time it was different, because she had begun to believe she had finally found someone who trusted her. She decided to go back to the St. Peter's Creek Bridge, her old home. Maybe there she could think better about how to prove she was telling the truth about the 3 men. When she arrived at the familiar spot, a dry space under the concrete bridge where she had slept for so long, she found old Ben, the paper collector who sometimes shared food with her. Hey, Lily, I thought you had disappeared. Haven't seen you around for days. Hi, Ben. I was living in a house, but I think I'll have to come back here. A house? What house, kid? Lily told the collector the whole story, from finding Arthur tied to the fence to the conversation she had overheard at the factory. Ben listened attentively, nodding his head from time to time. Kid, this story is very strange. Why would the man's wife call the shelter if you barely know each other? She doesn't like me. From the first day, she's wanted me to leave. But there's something that doesn't make sense in this whole story. Ben scratched his grey beard. If you really saw these 3 men running away, and if they really attacked your Mr. Arthur, why is his wife trying to discredit you? Lily had never thought about that. Do you think she knows something? Could be. Or it could be she's afraid of a scandal. These rich people are like that. But there's one thing you can do to prove you're not lying. What? Go back to the place where it all happened. Look for evidence that proves your version. What kind of evidence? Footprints, forgotten objects, marks on the ground. Anything that shows there were really 3 men there. The idea excited Lily. It was exactly the kind of thing she could do on her own, without having to depend on adults who didn't believe her. Meanwhile, at the factory, Arthur was facing the biggest dilemma of his life. Helen had planted doubts about Lily that he couldn't completely ignore. But something inside him refused to believe the girl was lying. Helen, even if Lily has behavioral problems, that doesn't mean she made up the story about the 3 men. Arthur, think about it. A child who has run away from the shelter 3 times, who has a history of making up stories, who has lived on the streets for years. Why would you trust her more than employees who have worked for you for 15 years? Because she saved my life, or because she was involved in what happened and is now trying to deflect attention? The suggestion left Arthur shocked. Are you implying that Lily participated in my kidnapping? I'm saying it's very convenient for a street kid to show up at just the right time to save you, and then make up a story about seeing the culprits. Arthur left the office without answering, his head spinning with doubts and questions. He looked for Lily in the factory but couldn't find her. When he asked the employees, no one had seen where she had gone. "Jim," Arthur called, "did you see Lily leave?" "I did, Mr. Miller. She ran out about 20 minutes ago, seemed upset about something." "Ran where? Towards the center of town, I think." Arthur felt a pang of guilt. Lily had overheard the conversation he had with Helen and had now run away, probably thinking he no longer believed her. "Helen, we're going to look for Lily now." "Arthur, maybe it's better to let her go. See, at the first sign that we would find out the truth about her, she ran away. Doesn't that prove I was right? It proves she's a scared child who heard terrible things about herself." At the St. Peter's Creek Bridge, Lily said goodbye to Ben and began the walk back to the Oak Haven Road. She had decided to investigate the place where she had found Arthur, looking for anything that could prove her version of the facts. The sun was hot when she reached the fence where it had all happened 3 days earlier. The place seemed abandoned and silent. Only the buzz of insects broke the afternoon quiet. Lily carefully examined the ground around the fence, looking for signs that other people had been there. That's when she found something interesting. Footprints in the soft dirt near a puddle of water. They weren't just Arthur's footprints. There were at least 3 different sets of marks, including a boot with a specific pattern on the sole. Lily remembered seeing Jim wearing similar boots at the factory. Excited by the discovery, she continued searching. She also found a cigarette butt that wasn't there before, and more importantly, a piece of blue fabric snagged on a nearby bush. She recognized the fabric immediately. It was identical to the uniforms some of the factory employees wore. "I knew it. I knew I wasn't lying," she said to herself, carefully pocketing the piece of fabric. But when she turned to leave, she found 3 men standing behind her. They were the exact same ones she had seen fleeing 3 days before: Jim, Elton, and Bernard. "Hello, Lily," said Jim in a voice that tried to sound friendly but was heavy with threat. "What are you doing here?" Lily felt her heart race, but she tried to stay calm. "Just taking a walk." "A walk?" Elton laughed sarcastically. "A 4-year-old girl walking alone on a deserted road? Doesn't seem very likely. Were you looking for something specific here?" asked Bernard, taking a step toward her. Lily hid the piece of fabric behind her back. "I wasn't looking for anything. Don't lie to us, girl." Jim moved closer. "We know you've been talking, saying you saw us here the day your Uncle Arthur had his little accident. I saw you running in the woods. I heard you talking about teaching the boss a lesson." The 3 men exchanged nervous glances. "Look, Lily," said Jim, crouching down to her level. "You're a smart girl, but sometimes people see things that aren't true, especially when they're nervous or scared. I know what I saw. The problem is, no one is going to believe a street kid over 3 respected employees. And if you keep spreading lies about us, very bad things could happen to you." "What kind of things?" Bernard spoke up in a harsh voice. "The kind of things that happen to kids who don't know when to keep quiet." Lily understood the threat and began to back away, slowly. The 3 men blocked her possible escape routes, forming a semicircle around her. "We don't want to hurt you, Lily," Jim continued, "but we need to make sure you got the message. Stop making up stories about us, or things will get very complicated for everyone. And if I don't stop, then you might end up having an accident, a much worse accident than what happened to your Uncle Arthur." At that moment, Lily realized her situation had become infinitely more dangerous. Not only did no one believe her, but now the real culprits knew she could identify them. And from the looks of it, they were willing to do anything to silence her. She clutched the piece of fabric in her hand, knowing it might be her only hope of proving the truth. But first, she would have to find a way to escape from these 3 men who were surrounding her with clearly hostile intentions. Lily knew her only chance of escape was to use her street smarts and a child's agility. When Jim was distracted for a second looking at Elton, she bolted towards the dense woods she knew well from her trash-collecting walks. Her small, bare feet carried her easily through branches and bushes that hindered the movement of the adult men. "Get her!" shouted Bernard, stumbling into a hole covered with leaves. Lily ran like she had never run before, jumping over rocks and dodging low branches. She could hear the three men behind her, breaking branches and cursing as they tried to keep up. The piece of fabric was clutched tightly in her sweaty hand. She knew that evidence was her only hope. After running for 20 minutes, she managed to reach the main road where a vegetable truck was parked. Without hesitation, she hid behind the vehicle until the three men ran past on the road, looking for her in the opposite direction. When she was sure they were far away, Lily came out of her hiding place and began to think about what to do. She couldn't go back to Arthur's house. Helen had made it clear she wasn't wanted there. She couldn't stay at the bridge, because now she knew the men might look for her there, and she couldn't go to the police because she was just a street kid with no credibility. It was then that she remembered Diane Fisher, the social worker from the municipal shelter. Although Lily had run away from the shelter several times, Diane had always been kind to her, never treating her like a problem to be solved. Maybe she was the only adult who would listen to her without judgment. The Department of Social Services building was in downtown Red Creek, a simple two-story building painted white. Lily arrived late in the afternoon as the employees were getting ready to leave. She found Diane organizing papers at her desk, preparing to end the day. "Lily, what a surprise to see you here." Diane smiled genuinely. "How are you? I heard you were living with a family." "Diane, I need your help. Something very bad is happening, and the adults don't believe me." Lily's serious tone caught Diane's attention, who put her papers aside and focused on the girl. "Sit here and tell me everything." Lily recounted the whole story from the beginning. Finding Arthur at the fence, the Vultures, life at the Miller house, the discovery about the three employees, and especially the threat she had received on the road. When she showed the piece of blue fabric, Diane examined it carefully. "Lily, this is a very serious accusation. Are you sure these men threatened you?" "I'm sure. They said I could have an accident worse than Mr. Arthur's." Diane frowned. "And Mr. Miller's wife, did she really say those things about you to him?" "I heard her talking. She said I'm a liar, that I make up stories, that I'm troubled." "Lily, do you know you've been in the shelter before?" "I know, but I ran away because I couldn't stand being locked in one place. Not because I was troubled." Diane consulted a folder with Lily's history. "It says here you had anxiety attacks when you were away from the bridge. The caregivers thought you had adjustment problems. I was scared. When you spend your whole life taking care of yourself, it's hard to trust that other people will take care of you." Lily's explanation made sense to Diane, who had worked with many children in similar situations. "And now, would you like to come back to the shelter while we investigate this situation?" "I want to go back to Mr. Arthur's house, but I don't know if he still believes me after what his wife said." Diane looked at the clock. "I'm going to call Mr. Miller now. I'll tell him where you are, and I'll hear his side of what happened." The call was answered on the first ring, as if Arthur had been waiting for news about Lily. "Mr. Miller, this is Diane Fisher from Social Services. Lily is with me, thank God. Is she okay? We've been looking for her for hours. She's fine, but she told me some worrying things. Could you come to my office so we can talk?" "Of course, I'm on my way now." 20 minutes later, Arthur arrived at the Social Services building. He was visibly distressed and ran to hug Lily as soon as he saw her. "My dear, I was desperate. Why did you run away like that?" "Because I heard Aunt Helen say I'm a liar and troubled. I thought you didn't believe me anymore." Arthur knelt in front of Lily. "I would never stop believing in you. Helen was just worried, but that doesn't mean I agree with her." Diane interrupted the conversation. "Mr. Miller, Lily told me about the three employees who allegedly attacked you. She also said they threatened her today." "What do you mean, threatened?" Lily showed the piece of fabric she had found and told him about the encounter with Jim, Elton, and Bernard on the road. Arthur was furious when he heard about the threats. They dared to threaten a child. "Mr. Miller, I need to ask about your wife." Lily said she called the shelter, asking about her history. Arthur seemed uncomfortable. Helen was worried. She wanted to better understand Lily's situation, but why would she present the information in a way that discredits the girl? I don't know. Helen has been very resistant to Lily's presence in our home. Diane made some notes. "Mr. Miller, based on what Lily told me, I recommend that you don't go back home today. If these men are really willing to threaten a child, the situation could be more dangerous than we imagine. What do you suggest? That you stay in a hotel tonight while I contact the proper authorities. These threats against Lily need to be investigated. And my wife, she's at home alone." Diane paused. "Mr. Miller, I have to ask a difficult question. Is there any possibility that your wife is involved with these employees who attacked you?" The question shocked Arthur. "What do you mean Helen would never do something like that? Then why was she so determined to discredit the only witness who could identify the culprits?" Lily looked at Arthur, seeing the confusion and pain in his eyes. "Mr. Arthur, there's something strange about Aunt Helen. She gets very nervous when anyone talks about the song I sing, and this morning, when you said I had seen the three men, she got very pale, as if she already knew." "What song?" asked Diane. Lily began to hum softly the same lullaby she had sung since she was little. It was a simple, melancholic melody, but there was something about it that always comforted her. Arthur listened to the music with growing attention. "Lily, where did you learn that song?" "I don't know. I've always known it. Sometimes I dream that someone sang it to me when I was little." "What kind of person?" "A young lady. She smelled like lavender and had soft hands." Diane watched Arthur's expression gradually change from confusion to something that looked like recognition. "Mr. Miller, do you recognize this song?" Arthur was silent for a long moment, his mind processing information he hadn't connected before. When he finally spoke, his voice was trembling. "I need to ask my wife some questions. Questions I should have asked a long time ago." Night fell over Red Creek as Arthur drove silently through the city streets, with Lily in the passenger seat, watching the house lights through the windows. Diane had arranged a room for them at the Central Hotel for the night, but Arthur was too restless to think about rest. Suspicions about Helen grew in his mind like a dark shadow. "Mr. Arthur, are you mad at me?" Lily asked timidly. "Mad? Why? Because of all this trouble. If I hadn't saved you on the road, none of this would be happening." Arthur stopped the car in the hotel parking lot and turned to her. "Lily, you saved my life. Everything that's happening now is the result of bad choices other people made, not yours. But what if Aunt Helen is right? What if I really am troubled?" "You are not troubled. You are a brave child who has been through very difficult things." Arthur held her small hand. "And I will find out the truth about all of this, I promise." In the simple but clean hotel room, Lily curled up on one of the beds while Arthur sat in the armchair by the window, watching the street. His mind was in turmoil, processing all the information from the last few days. The song Lily sang, the scent of lavender she mentioned, the way Helen reacted when she first heard about the girl. "Lily," he said softly, "tell me more about your dreams, about the lady who sang to you." "I don't remember very well, just that she was young and always sad when she sang, as if the song made her cry. And do you remember anything else about where you were?" Lily closed her eyes, trying to reach for fragmented memories. A house that smelled like cornbread. It had a small yard with a tree, and there was always an older woman complaining about something. Arthur felt a chill run down his spine. The description perfectly matched the house where he and Helen now lived, the same house where Helen had grown up with her mother, Mrs. Higgins. Lily, the older woman who complained. Do you remember what her voice was like? It was a harsh voice that always sounded irritated, and she talked a lot about family shame and what the neighbors will think. Lily's words perfectly described Mrs. Higgins, Helen's mother who had passed away 5 years ago. Arthur clearly remembered his mother-in-law's constant worries about the family's reputation and her tendency to criticize anything she considered inappropriate. "Mr. Arthur, are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Lily, I need to ask you a very important question. Have you ever heard the name Irene?" The girl sat up in bed, alert. "How do you know that name? You know that name. Sometimes in my dreams, the lady who sang to me called herself Ira. I always thought it was a strange name." Arthur felt as if the world had stopped spinning. Irene was the name of the daughter Helen had always denied having, the daughter who had supposedly gone to study in Austin and never sent word again. But now he was beginning to suspect that the story was much more complicated than Helen had told. "Lily, would you trust me if I said we might have found clues about who took care of you when you were a baby?" "I would. But does that mean I'm not just any abandoned child? It means you might have a family, a real family." That same night, in another part of the city, Helen paced nervously through the empty house, waiting for Arthur to return with news about Lily. She had called his cell phone several times, but he didn't answer. The more time passed, the more she became convinced that something had gone terribly wrong with her plans. When the phone rang at 10 o'clock, she ran to answer it. "Arthur, where are you?" "Helen, we're fine. We're at a hotel for safety." "A hotel? Why a hotel?" "Because Lily was threatened today by the same men who attacked me. The situation is more dangerous than we imagined." Helen felt her blood run cold. "Threatened? What do you mean?" Jim, Elton, and Bernard cornered her on the Oakhaven Road and said she could have an accident if she kept talking about them. My God, and you believe her? Of course I believe her. "Helen, why are you so determined to discredit everything Lily says?" "I'm not determined to do anything. I'm just being realistic." "Or you're trying to hide something." The silence on the other end of the line was too long. "What are you talking about, Arthur?" "Helen, who is Irene?" The phone almost slipped from Helen's hands. How do you know that name?" Lily recognized the name. She said the lady who took care of her when she was little was called Ira. "That's impossible." "Why is it impossible? Because Irene left years ago and never sent word again? Or because you always knew she never went to Austin?" "Arthur, you don't know what you're talking about. Then explain it to me. Explain why Lily sings the same lullaby I heard Irene singing years ago. Explain why she remembers the scent of lavender your daughter always wore. Explain why she perfectly describes the house where Irene grew up." Helen started to cry on the other end of the line. "Arthur, you don't understand what happened." "Then make me understand the whole truth, Helen. Irene got pregnant at 16. The father was a married man from town, someone who would never acknowledge the child. My mother was furious, said it was a disgrace to the family. So I convinced Irene to leave before the baby was born. I said that when things calmed down, she could come back. But she didn't come back." "She did come back," Helen sobbed. "She came back with a baby a few months old, but my mother wouldn't have them. She said she'd rather the neighbors thought Irene had gone to study in Austin than know the truth. And what happened to Irene and the baby? They stayed hidden in the basement for a few weeks. Irene was desperate, had no money, nowhere to go. And the baby cried a lot, which made my mother more and more irritated. Arthur felt nausea growing in his stomach. Go on. One night, there was a terrible fight between Irene and my mother. My mother said horrible things about the baby, called her a bastard and the family curse. Irene left the house that same night with the child. And you let her. I thought she'd come back. I thought it was just a tantrum, that in a few days she'd come back asking for forgiveness. But she didn't come back. No. And after a few weeks, We found out there was an abandoned baby at the door of Our Lady of the Rosary Church, a baby that matched the age of the granddaughter I never really got to know. Arthur closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the revelation. And you never investigated? How could I? If it really was my granddaughter, it would be admitting that Irene had the child here, that we kicked her out of the house. It would be admitting that my mother and I were responsible for a child being abandoned. And Irene, what happened to her? We never heard from her again. It's as if she vanished from the face of the earth. Arthur took a deep breath. Helen, are you telling me that Lily could be your granddaughter? I always suspected, especially when I saw her for the first time. She has Irene's eyes, the same way of tilting her head when she talks, and yet you tried to get rid of her because I'm scared of what people will think when they know the truth. Scared to admit that I rejected my own granddaughter for years. Helen, I'm coming home now, and when I get there, you're going to tell me everything. Every detail about what happened with Irene and why you preferred to let a child suffer on the streets than admit she was family. Arthur hung up the phone and looked at Lily, who had heard the entire conversation in silence. Mr. Arthur, she said in a small voice, does this mean I have a grandma? The next morning, Arthur and Lily arrived at the house on Magnolia Lane to find Helen sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by dusty boxes she had brought down from the attic during the night. Her eyes were red from crying and lack of sleep, and papers were scattered all over the table, old photographs, yellow documents, and unsent letters. Helen? Arthur approached cautiously, holding Lily's hand. I spent all night looking for proof, she said without looking at them. Proof that I'm not the monster you must think I am. Lily watched Helen with cautious curiosity. There was something different about the woman, a fragility she had never seen before, as if all her defenses had crumbled during the night. What kind of proof? Asked Arthur, sitting down at the table. Helen picked up a faded photograph and showed it to them. It was the image of a young woman with long hair and large eyes, holding a small baby. This is Irene, with Lily. It was taken 2 weeks before they left. Lily took the photo with trembling hands. Although she didn't consciously remember the woman in the picture, something inside her recognized that face. Is this my mom? She was. Helen replied, her voice breaking. And I was a terrible grandmother to you. Helen, tell me everything that happened. From the beginning, said Arthur. Helen took a deep breath and began the narrative she had rehearsed all through the sleepless night. Irene was always a dreamy, different girl. While other girls her age thought about marriage and family, she talked about traveling, seeing the world. This really irritated my mother. And Lily's father, who was he? Charles Edward Stafford. He was married, had a fabric store in the center of town. Irene worked for him in the afternoons after school. When she got pregnant, he denied everything and threatened to sue our family for slander if we told anyone. Lily listened in silence, absorbing information about a life she didn't know she had. My mother was desperate about the scandal. She said the family's reputation was ruined. She convinced Irene to go to a neighboring city where a cousin of ours lived, to have the baby away from prying eyes. But she came back, Arthur completed. She came back after 6 months with you in her arms, Lily. You were a beautiful baby, but you were always sick, always crying. Irene had no experience with children and was desperate. Helen picked up another photo, this one showing a small, simple house. They stayed in the basement of my mother's house. It was the only way to hide you from the neighbors. But Mrs. Higgins got more and more irritated with the baby's crying. And you? What were you doing during this? The accusation in Arthur's voice was thinly veiled. I was a coward. Helen slammed her fist on the table. I was afraid of my own mother, afraid of what people would think, afraid to admit that my daughter had gone astray. So, I pretended the problem didn't exist. Lily approached the photos scattered on the table, examining each one carefully. In several of them, a tiny version of herself appeared, a baby with light hair in the arms of a young woman who looked exhausted and sad. "What happened on the last night?" asked Arthur. "There was a terrible fight. You had gotten sick, Lily, with a high fever, and Irene wanted to take you to the doctor, but my mother said we couldn't risk anyone finding out about you. She suggested that." Helen stopped, struggling to continue. "Suggested what? That Irene give you up for adoption. She said it would be better for everyone if the child disappeared and Irene could start her life over, as if nothing had happened." Lily felt a pang of pain in her chest. Even though she was too young to fully understand, she understood she was hearing about the moment her family had given up on her. Irene was furious. She said she would never abandon her daughter, that she would rather leave forever than hand you over to strangers. My mother replied that then she should leave the house that very night and never come back. And you let that happen? I thought it was just anger, that in a few days everything would calm down, but when I woke up the next morning, they were gone. They had only taken a bag of clothes and some blankets. Arthur looked at Lily, who was clutching one of the photographs. "And after? You didn't try to look?" "We looked for 2 weeks. We asked relatives, friends, acquaintances. No one knew anything. And then an abandoned baby appeared at the church," Arthur finished. "Father Michael came to our house, and telling us about the baby that had been left on the church doorstep, he said it was a girl of about 6 months, very thin, wearing what looked like homemade clothes. And you didn't investigate? My mother forbade it. She said if it really was Lily, it would mean Irene had given up on her daughter, and that it wasn't our problem." "But you knew it was her," said Arthur, not as a question, but as a statement. "I knew." Helen broke into sobs. "I knew it was my granddaughter being cared for by strangers and then living on the streets. And I did nothing. For 4 years, I did nothing." Lily dropped the photograph and approached Helen. To everyone's surprise, she climbed onto the chair next to the woman and hugged her. "Why are you hugging me?" asked Helen, confused. "Because you're crying. And when people cry, it's because they're in pain." Lily's simple, generous gesture made Helen cry even more. "You don't understand, Lily. I rejected you. I knew you existed, and I chose to ignore it." "You were scared," said Lily with wisdom beyond her years. "People do bad things when they're scared." Arthur watched the interaction between grandmother and granddaughter with emotion. Helen and Irene. What happened to her after she abandoned Lily? We never heard from her again. It's as if she completely disappeared. At that moment, the doorbell rang. Arthur went to answer, finding Diane Fisher accompanied by a man he didn't know. "Mr. Miller, this is Investigator Paul Stevens from the Child and Family Services. We've come to follow up on the investigation into the threats against Lily." "Of course, come in." When they reached the kitchen, Paul Stevens observed the scene of scattered photographs and Helen's emotional state. "We've discovered something important about the case," said Diane. "Apparently, Lily may have family here in Red Creek." "We've discovered more than that," said Arthur. "We've discovered that Helen is Lily's biological grandmother." The revelation surprised both Diane and the investigator. "What do you mean?" Arthur quickly told the story of Irene and Helen's confession. Paul Stevens took detailed notes, asking specific questions about dates and circumstances. "Mrs. Miller, are you sure you never heard from Irene Santos again?" "Absolutely. She completely vanished after leaving Lily at the church." "Well, I have some news that might be important to you," said the investigator. "During our investigations, we discovered that a woman named Irene Santos was admitted to St. Teresa's Psychiatric Hospital in a nearby city 3 years ago." The ensuing silence was deafening. Helen turned white as a sheet. "Admitted for what? asked Arthur. Severe depression and psychotic episodes. According to the records, she constantly talked about a daughter she had lost and the guilt she felt for abandoning the child. Lily looked from one adult to another, trying to understand the meaning of that information. "Is she still there?" asked Helen with a trembling voice. "She is. And according to the doctors, she asks about a girl named Lily every day." The drive to the hospital was made in tense silence. Helen held her trembling hands in her lap. Arthur focused on driving to keep from thinking about what awaited them, and Lily watched the landscape from the window, quietly humming the lullaby she now knew she had learned from her mother. St. Teresa's Psychiatric Hospital was an old red brick building surrounded by well-kept gardens that tried to mask the melancholy of the place. When they arrived at the reception, they were met by Dr. Carla Hayes, the psychiatrist responsible for Irene's case. "Before I allow the meeting," the doctor explained, "I need you to understand the patient's mental state. Irene suffers from severe depression caused by emotional trauma. She has lucid episodes interspersed with periods of mental confusion." "How is she today?" asked Helen, visibly nervous. "Today is a good day. She is lucid and can hold coherent conversations, but you need to be prepared for intense emotional reactions." "Will she recognize me?" asked Lily, squeezing Arthur's hand. "Lily, your mother talks about you every day. She keeps a drawing next to her bed, a drawing of a little girl she made from memory. I'm sure she will recognize you." The hallway to Irene's room seemed endless. When they finally reached the door, Dr. Hayes knocked lightly before entering. "Irene, you have visitors." The woman sitting by the window turned slowly. At 25, Irene looked as if she had aged a decade. Her hair, once long and shiny like in the photographs, was cut short and lifeless. Her thin face bore the marks of years of suffering. But when her eyes fixed on Lily, all the melancholy vanished, replaced by an expression of shock and joy. "Lily, my Lily." Irene got up from the chair, trembling. "Hi, Mom," said Lily with simplicity, as if only a few hours had passed since they last saw each other. Irene knelt and opened her arms, and Lily ran to hug her. Mother and daughter held each other for long minutes, crying together, while Helen and Arthur watched emotionally. "You've grown so much," whispered Irene, pulling back to look closely at her daughter. "You're so beautiful, so healthy. I thought you had." "I'm fine, Mom. Mr. Arthur and Grandma Helen are taking care of me." Irene looked at Helen for the first time, and the atmosphere in the room grew tense. "Mother," said Irene, her voice a mix of pain and anger, "after 4 years, you decided to show up. Irene, Helen struggled to find words. "I didn't know you were here. We didn't know where you were. You knew exactly where Lily was. She was abandoned on the doorstep of the church in Red Creek, and everyone in town knew it. We weren't sure." "Not sure?" Irene stood up, her voice getting louder. "Or you didn't want to be sure," Dr. Hayes intervened. "Irene, you need to calm down. Remember what we talked about controlling your emotions." Irene took a deep breath and sat down again, pulling Lily onto her lap. "I'm sorry, my dear. I shouldn't be shouting in front of you." "It's okay, Mom. I understand why you're angry." "Irene," said Arthur gently, "tell me what happened after you left home with Lily." "We spent a few weeks sleeping in different places, bus stations, parks, houses of people who took pity on us. Lily was constantly sick, and I had no money for a doctor. And why did you leave her at the church?" Irene hugged Lily tighter. "Because I was desperate. I couldn't get a job because no one wanted to hire a single mother with a baby. Lily was crying from hunger, and I had no milk to give her." "But why didn't you come back home?" asked Helen. "Because you made it very clear that you didn't want me there, and especially didn't want my daughter." "Irene, I know we made a mistake." "A mistake?" Irene laughed bitterly. "You kicked me out of the house pregnant, denied me support when I needed it most, and then pretended I didn't exist." Lily watched the argument between her mother and grandmother with a worried expression. "Mom, why didn't you come get me later?" Lily's simple question broke Irene's heart. "Because after I left you at the church, I collapsed. I couldn't eat, sleep, work. I wandered the streets of several cities, always thinking about coming back for you, but feeling unworthy of being your mother." Unworthy why? Because what kind of mother abandons her own child, even if it's to protect them? "A mother who loves very much and was desperate," replied Lily, repeating words Arthur had said to her days before. Dr. Hayes watched the interaction with clinical interest. "Irene, how do you feel seeing Lily now? Happy, but also guilty. She grew up without me. She went through hardships I should have prevented. But I survived," said Lily pragmatically, "and now we have a chance to be a family again." "About that," Arthur interrupted, "we need to talk about the next steps. Irene, the doctors say you're getting better. Is there a possibility of being discharged from the hospital?" Dr. Hayes answered. "Irene has been responding well to treatment for the last 6 months. With proper family support and psychological follow-up, she could be discharged in a few weeks." "And could I stay with my mom?" asked Lily hopefully. "That would need to be evaluated by social workers," explained Dr. Hayes. "Irene is better, but she's still recovering. Lily would need stable care in the meantime." Helen spoke up for the first time in several minutes. "She can stay with us. Lily can stay with us while Irene fully recovers." Everyone looked at Helen, surprised by the offer. "Why?" asked Irene suspiciously. "Because she's my granddaughter, and because I want to try to make up for the mistakes I made." Helen approached Irene. "Daughter, I know I can't erase the past. I know I was cowardly and selfish, but I want a chance to do the right thing now. And if I say no, then I will respect your decision. But please don't deprive Lily of having a family while you recover." Irene looked at Lily, seeing the hope in her daughter's eyes. "What do you want, my love? I want you to get well, and I want to be near you while that happens. If I live with Grandma Helen and Mr. Arthur, can I come visit you often?" "Every day if you want," promised Arthur. Dr. Hayes intervened again. "I believe this would be a good temporary solution. Irene, what do you think?" Irene was silent for a long time, holding Lily in her lap and looking out the window. When she finally spoke, her voice was firm. "All right, but on one condition." "What?" asked Helen. "I want you to promise me that this time, if any problem arises, you won't just abandon me. I want us to fight together as a family." Helen knelt beside Irene's chair. "I promise, daughter, this time we will face everything together." It was then that Lily asked a question that changed the course of the entire conversation. "Mom, what about my dad? Can you tell me about him now?" Irene's face darkened. "Why do you want to know about him?" "Because maybe he didn't know I existed. Maybe he wants to meet me too." Helen and Irene exchanged a look heavy with meaning. There was something about Lily's father they hadn't told, something that could further complicate an already delicate situation. Back in Red Creek, the house on Magnolia Lane had been completely transformed. In just 1 week, Helen had arranged a proper room for Lily, with new furniture and toys she had never dreamed of owning. But the most noticeable change was in Helen herself. The rigid, appearance-conscious woman had given way to a dedicated grandmother who was discovering the joy of caring for her granddaughter. "Grandma, can I help you make the cornbread?" Lily asked one Saturday morning, climbing onto a chair to reach the kitchen counter. "Of course. My dear, your mother loved helping me in the kitchen when she was little." As they prepared the batter together, Lily asked a question Helen had been dreading. "Grandma, why did Mum get sad when I asked about my dad?" Helen stopped mixing the batter. She knew this conversation was inevitable, but she still hadn't found a proper way to explain the situation to a 4-year-old child. "It's complicated. Lily, your father is someone who already has his own family." "What do you mean?" He's married to someone else and has other children. When your mother got pregnant with you, he was afraid his wife would find out. Lily absorbed this information with the seriousness of a child who had already learned that the adult world was full of complications. Is he a bad person? Not necessarily bad, but a coward. He chose to protect his own life instead of taking responsibility for you. And does he still live here in Red Creek? Helen hesitated before answering. He does, and that's part of the problem. That same day, while Lily was playing in the yard, Arthur came home from the factory with a worried expression. The situation with Jim and the other employees had become even more complicated since the truth about Lily began to spread through the town. Helen, we need to talk about something urgent, he said, closing the kitchen door. What happened? Jim got a lawyer. He's claiming our accusations are baseless and that we're trying to destroy his reputation to protect our own family. What do you mean? He found out that Lily is our granddaughter, and now he's spreading it around town that we invented this whole story about the attack to hide the fact that you abandoned a child from the family. Helen felt her blood run cold. Can he do that? He can, and he is. Several clients have already called to cancel orders. People are saying they don't want to do business with a family that abandons children. But we didn't abandon her. We didn't even know. To the town, it doesn't matter. What matters is that our granddaughter lived on the streets for 4 years while we had the means to care for her. Lily, who had silently come in to get a glass of water, overheard the conversation and hid behind the kitchen door. And now? What are we going to do? Asked Helen. I don't know. Maybe we'll have to leave Red Creek. Start somewhere else. Leave Red Creek. Arthur, this is our town. Our life is here. Our life here is being destroyed. And the longer we stay, the worse it will be for Lily. The kids at school are already talking about her, calling her the abandoned girl. Lily felt tears burn her eyes. Once again, her presence was causing problems for people she cared about. Silently, she went back to the yard and sat under the oak tree, thinking of a solution. It was then that she remembered the words old Ben had said about evidence. Maybe there was still a way to prove that Jim and the other employees were guilty of the attack on Arthur. That afternoon, while Helen cooked and Arthur worked in his office, Lily quietly left the house. She knew the streets of Red Creek well now, and she knew where Jim lived, in a small house on the south side, on the other side of town. Lily's plan was simple. Find more evidence linking Jim to the attack on Arthur. She remembered the piece of blue fabric she had found, but she knew it wouldn't be enough to convince anyone. When she reached the street where Jim lived, Lily hid behind a parked car and watched the house. Through the living room window, she could see Jim talking animatedly with 2 other men, Elton and Bernard. Lily carefully approached the window, trying to hear the conversation. The problem is the girl has evidence, Elton was saying. What evidence? She's just a street kid. No one's going to believe her, replied Jim. But now they found out she's the miller's granddaughter. That changes everything, said Bernard. Changes nothing. If anything, it makes their situation worse. Everyone in town is talking about how they abandoned their own granddaughter. And what if she tells someone what she heard on the road about our conversations before we tied Arthur up? Lily's eyes widened. They were confessing. She can't prove anything, Jim insisted. Besides, who's going to believe a traumatized little girl against 3 respected employees? Jim's right, Elton agreed. The strategy is working. We've managed to turn the tables on them. And the best part, added Bernard, laughing, is that now they're so worried about protecting the family's reputation, they won't even want to take this to court. Exactly. They'll prefer to leave town quietly rather than face a bigger scandal. Lily had heard enough, but as she tried to move away from the window, she bumped into a flower pot on the sill. The noise alerted the 3 men who ran to the window. There's someone out there, yelled Elton. Lily ran as fast as she could, but her small feet were no match for the long legs of the adult men. They caught her 2 blocks later on a deserted street. Look who we have here, said Jim, grabbing Lily's arm. "The little spy." "I wasn't spying," protested Lily, trying to break free. "Of course you were. And now you've heard our conversation." "What conversation?" "I didn't hear anything. Don't lie to us, girl. You heard everything." Bernard looked around nervously. "What are we going to do with her?" "We can't let her go back home and tell them what she heard," said Elton. "You're scaring me," said Lily, her voice trembling. "Good," replied Jim with a cruel smile, "because you should be scared." "Jim, we can't hurt a child," protested Bernard. "We're not going to hurt her. We're just going to make sure she understands that certain conversations should remain secret. What if I promise not to tell?" "A child's promises aren't worth much," said Jim, tightening his grip on her arm. It was at that moment that Lily heard a car approaching. To her surprise and relief, it was Arthur, who had noticed her absence and had come out to look for her. "Lily!" he shouted, jumping out of the car. "What are you doing with her?" "Ah, Arthur," said Jim, trying to sound casual but not letting go of Lily's arm. "We found your granddaughter here on the street, all alone. We were just looking after her until you arrived." "Looking after her? Why are you holding her like that?" "Mr. Arthur," Lily cried out, "they confessed. I heard them talking about when they tied you to the fence." Jim's face transformed. "She's lying. She's making up stories again." "Is she?" Arthur approached threateningly. "Then why are you holding a child on a deserted street? We were just... Let go of my granddaughter. Now." The three men looked at each other nervously, realizing the situation had spun completely out of control. Jim released Lily's arm, and she ran into Arthur's arms. "This isn't over," threatened Jim. "You'll regret messing with us." But as he spoke, he didn't realize that Arthur had discreetly turned on his phone's recorder, capturing every word of the threat. The morning after the incident with Jim and his cronies, Arthur woke up determined to resolve the situation for good. The recording he had made of the threats against Lily would be his weapon to finally unmask the real culprits. But first, he had a difficult conversation ahead of him. Helen was in the kitchen preparing coffee when he came down, and Lily was still asleep after the traumatic night. It was the perfect moment to broach a subject he had been avoiding for days. "Helen, we need to talk about Charles Edward Stafford." She stopped stirring the coffee without turning to look at him. "What about him?" "Lily has the right to know her father, and he has the right to know he has a daughter." "Arthur, you don't understand the situation. Charles is married to Marina Stafford, has been for 20 years. They have 3 teenage children. If they find out about Lily, they'll find out anyway. The news about her is already spreading through town. It's better he hears it from us than from the gossips." Helen finally turned, revealing a face full of worry. "What if he denies it? What if he says Irene is lying? Then we'll do a paternity test, but I'm sure he'll recognize it when he sees Lily. She has his eyes." At that moment, Lily appeared in the kitchen, still wearing the pajamas Helen had bought for her. "Good morning, Grandma. Good morning, Mr. Arthur." "Good morning, my dear," said Helen, hugging her. "How are you feeling today?" "Better. I dreamed about Mom. She said she's proud of me for being brave yesterday." Arthur exchanged a meaningful look with Helen. "Lily, how would you feel about meeting your father?" "It would be nice, but will he like me?" "How could anyone not like you?" replied Arthur, stroking her hair. 2 hours later, Arthur parked in front of Stafford's Fabrics in downtown Red Creek. It was a traditional establishment, operating for decades in the same location. Lily observed the storefront with curiosity. "Is this where my dad works?" "It is. Are you nervous?" "A little." "What if he doesn't want to meet me? Then it's his loss, not yours." Charles Edward Stafford was helping a customer when he saw Arthur enter the store accompanied by a small girl. At 50, Charles maintained the look of a successful man he had always cultivated. Well-cut hair, impeccable clothes, a confident posture. "Arthur, what a surprise to see you here. How can I help you?" Charles greeted him cordially, but his eyes fixed on Lily with a confused expression. Charles, I need to talk to you about a personal matter. It's about this girl. What girl? Is she your daughter? No, Charles. She's your daughter. The silence that followed was deafening. Charles looked from Arthur to Lily, noticing for the first time the undeniable physical similarities, the green eyes, the shape of the face, even the way she tilted her head when observing something. "This is ridiculous," Charles muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. "Her mother is Irene Santos. Remember Irene." Charles turned visibly pale. "Irene. I haven't seen her in years because she got pregnant and you abandoned her." "I didn't abandon anyone. She never told me she was pregnant. She tried to tell you, but you refused to listen. You said if she spread lies about you, you'd sue her family." Lily watched the exchange of accusations in silence, trying to understand why the man who was supposed to be her father seemed so agitated. "Arthur, even if this child were my daughter, what do you expect me to do? I have a family, responsibilities. I expect you to acknowledge your paternity and help raise your daughter." "Impossible. Marina would never accept that. My children would be devastated. And Lily, doesn't she deserve to have a father? She seems to be well cared for. You and Helen can continue." "Charles," Arthur interrupted, his voice laced with contempt, "you're being a coward again, exactly like you were 5 years ago." Lily approached Charles, looking him directly in the eyes. "Sir, are you really my dad?" Charles avoided the girl's gaze. I can't say for sure. Can we do a test then?" "To be sure." Lily's simple suggestion made Charles even more nervous. "It's not that simple, little girl." "Why not? If you're my dad, I'd like to meet my siblings. Your siblings can't know about you." The statement was an involuntary confession. Charles realized his mistake too late. "So you are my dad," said Lily sadly. "But you're ashamed of me. It's not shame, it's—" "What is it, Charles?" asked Arthur. "It's complicated. You don't understand the position this puts me in." At that moment, an elegant woman of about 45 entered the store. It was Marina, Charles's wife, coming to pick him up for lunch. "Charles, are you ready to—" "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know you had customers." Charles became visibly flustered. "Marina, this is Arthur Miller and a girl." Marina looked at Lily with curiosity. "What a beautiful girl." "What's your name, dear Lily?" the girl replied politely. "Lily what?" The simple question created an awkward silence. Lily looked at Arthur, then at Charles, waiting for someone to answer. "Lily Santos," Arthur finally said. "Santos?" Marina frowned. "As in Irene Santos, the girl who worked here years ago?" Another tense silence. "Marina," said Charles nervously, "maybe it's better we talk about this at home." "Talk about what?" "Charles, what is going on here?" It was Lily who broke the silence. "Mrs. Marina, I'm your husband's daughter." Lily's innocent declaration was like a bomb exploding in the store. Marina looked from the girl to her husband, slowly processing what she had just heard. "What do you mean, my husband's daughter?" "She's Irene's daughter," explained Arthur, "and Charles's." Marina leaned on the counter, the shock evident on her face. "Charles, is this true?" Charles looked around the store like a cornered animal. "Marina, I can explain." "Explain? You had a child with another woman and never told me. It's not like that." "Then what is it like? Tell me exactly what it's like." The customers in the store began to stare at the commotion, whispering among themselves. Charles realized the situation was becoming the public scandal he had always feared. "Marina, let's go home and talk about this." "No, I want to know now. Is this girl really your daughter?" Charles looked at Lily, seeing his own image reflected in her green eyes. There was no way to deny the clear physical resemblance. "She is," he finally admitted. "She's my daughter." Marina sat down heavily in a chair, the weight of the revelation hitting her completely. "And you knew?" I suspected." "You suspected and never did anything? For all these years?" "It was complicated." "Complicated." Marina stood up, her voice getting louder. An abandoned child is complicated. Your own daughter living on the streets is complicated. Lily watched the argument with growing sadness, realizing that her arrival was destroying a family, just as it had initially done with Arthur and Helen. "I'm so sorry," she said quietly. "I didn't want to cause trouble." Marina looked at Lily, and for a moment her anger turned to compassion. "Dear, you haven't caused any trouble. The problems already existed. You just brought them to light." The woman knelt in front of Lily. "What's your name again?" "Lily. Lily, do you have any other siblings?" "No, Mom, just me." Marina looked at Charles with an expression that mixed disappointment and determination. "Charles, we're going to talk a lot about this. But first, this girl needs to meet her blood siblings." "Marina, you can't be serious." "I'm very serious. Lily is your daughter, which makes her our children's sister, and they have the right to know their sister." 6 months had passed since the discovery of Lily's true identity, and life in Red Creek had found a new balance, though not without its scars and challenges. The house on Magnolia Lane now breathed a genuine happiness, with Irene living in the guest room since her discharge from the psychiatric hospital, and Lily finally experiencing what it was like to have a complete family. That Sunday morning, Lily woke up early with the anxiety she always felt before visits to the Stafford house. Over the past few months, she had developed a close relationship with her half-siblings, 17-year-old Edward, 15-year-old Marianne, and 12-year-old Peter. But she still felt like a visitor in their home, never completely at ease. "Mom, do I have to go to Papa Charles's house today?" she asked while Irene combed her hair. "Why don't you want to go, my dear? Did something happen?" "Nothing happened. It's just that. Sometimes I feel like I'm bothering them. Mrs. Marina is kind to me, but I can tell she gets sad when she sees me." Irene sighed, understanding her daughter's dilemma perfectly. "Lily, the situation isn't easy for anyone. Marina is trying to cope with the fact that her husband had a child out of wedlock. But that doesn't mean you're a problem. What if I stop going there? Maybe it would be better for everyone." "Don't say that. Your siblings like you very much, and Charles, even though he's clumsy about it, cares too." From downstairs came Arthur's voice. "Lily, come down here, there's a surprise for you." Curious, Lily ran down and found Arthur in the living room holding an official letter. "What is it, Mr. Arthur?" "It's a response from the judge about the adoption petition we filed." Lily's heart raced. Months ago, Arthur and Helen had filed for joint adoption, allowing them to be legally recognized as her adoptive parents, even with Irene alive and present. It was an unusual situation, but one that had been accepted given the special circumstances of the case. And what did he say? He said yes. "Now you are officially our granddaughter and adopted daughter at the same time." Lily jumped for joy, hugging Arthur. Then she ran to the kitchen where Helen was preparing the Sunday lunch that had become a family tradition. "Grandma, now I'm your real granddaughter on paper too." Helen dropped what she was doing and hugged Lily with tears in her eyes. "You were always my real granddaughter, my dear. The paper is just a confirmation. And does this mean I'll never have to leave here again?" "Never again," Helen assured her. Later that day, the family headed to the Stafford house for the weekly lunch that Marina had insisted on establishing. Despite the initial difficulties, she had shown herself determined to integrate Lily into the family, even if it meant facing her own confused feelings about the situation. The Stafford house was larger and more luxurious than the Millers, with a large garden and a pool in the back. When they arrived, they found Edward, Marianne, and Peter playing in the yard. "Lily!" shouted Peter, running to hug her. "Did you bring the puzzle you promised?" "I did!" Lily showed the box she was carrying. "It has 1,000 pieces. Wow, that'll take weeks to finish," said Marianne, smiling. Edward, the oldest, approached more cautiously. From the beginning, he had been the slowest to accept the existence of his half-sister. "Hi, Lily. How are you?" I'm fine, Edward. How was your chemistry test? It was good. Thanks for asking. The relationship between the siblings had evolved slowly but steadily. Peter had immediately taken a liking to Lily, treating her like the little sister he always wanted. Marianne, initially reserved, had become a protective sister. Edward, the most complicated, still struggled with feelings of divided loyalty between his mother and his new sister. Marina appeared at the porch door, wearing an apron and forcing a smile. "Hello, everyone. Lily, dear, how are you?" "I'm fine, Mrs. Marina. Thank you for having me for lunch. You will always be welcome here." Charles appeared behind his wife, clearly uncomfortable as he always was during these family gatherings. In recent months, he had tried to build a relationship with Lily, but guilt and embarrassment always created a barrier between them. "Hi, Lily. How is school?" "It's good, Papa Charles. I got an A on my math test. That's good. Very good." The forced conversation between father and daughter was painful to witness, but everyone pretended it was natural. During lunch, Peter talked excitedly about a science project he was developing, while Marianne spoke about the school play. Edward remained quiet, occasionally looking at Lily with a thoughtful expression. "Lily," Marina said suddenly, "I have a proposal for you." "What proposal?" "How about spending a week here at the house during the school holidays so you can get to know your siblings better?" The suggestion took everyone by surprise, especially Charles, who almost choked on his juice. "Marina," he began. "I think it would be good for the children to spend more time together," she continued, ignoring her husband's discomfort. "I'd like that very much," said Lily, looking at Irene. "Can I, Mom? If that's what you want, of course you can." "I'd love to have Lily here for a week," said Peter enthusiastically. "That would be cool," agreed Marianne. Everyone looked at Edward, waiting for his opinion. The young man was silent for a moment before speaking. "Actually, I have something to say to everyone." The seriousness in his voice caught everyone's attention. "What is it, son?" asked Marina. Edward looked directly at Lily. "Since you showed up, I've been kind of cold to you, and I want to apologize." "Edward, you don't have to," began Lily. "Yes, I do. At first, I was angry because I thought you were going to mess up our family. But I realized something over the last few months." "What did you realize?" asked Charles. "I realized our family was already kind of messed up. We just didn't know it. There was always something missing, you know. And now that Lily is here, it feels like we found the missing piece." Edward's speech moved everyone, especially Marina, who had struggled so much with her own feelings about the situation. "Besides," Edward continued, "Lily is the bravest person I know. She's been through terrible things and still manages to be kind to everyone. If I had been through half of what she's been through, I'd probably be a bitter person." "Edward," murmured Lily, tears in her eyes. "So yes, I want you to spend a week here, and I want you to know that you can count on me for anything, because that's what siblings do for each other." Lily got up from her chair and hugged Edward, who returned the hug for the first time since they had met. "Thank you, Edward. I always wanted to have an older brother, and I always wanted to have a younger sister," he replied, smiling. Marina watched the scene with tears in her eyes, realizing that despite all the pain and confusion of the past few months, something beautiful had emerged from that complicated situation. "Well," she said, wiping her eyes, "it looks like we're going to have a very special week during the upcoming holidays." Charles, who had remained quiet throughout the exchange, finally spoke up. "Lily, I know I haven't been a very present father, but I want you to know that I'm trying to learn how to be better. I know, Papa Charles, and it's okay. We have time to learn together." Lily's mature response deeply touched Charles, who for the first time since meeting her, approached and hugged her genuinely. "I'm very proud of the daughter you've become," he whispered. Even though I didn't help raise you, especially because of that, you became an incredible person without my help. It shows how strong you are." At that moment, watching her expanded family gathered around the table, Lily understood that she had found something she had always been looking for without knowing it. Not just parents or a house, but a place where she belonged completely, where she was loved unconditionally, and where she could finally be just a normal child with a family that, despite being unconventional, was truly hers. If you liked this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment what you thought of my story, giving it a rating from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.